All right, let's be honest for a second. Are you still testing APIs by, well, just guessing? Poking around endpoints, hoping something works, and constantly asking developers for the basic rules? There is a much, much smarter way. Today, we're going to look at the one document that acts as the ultimate blueprint for any API, turning all that testing chaos into absolute clarity. Does this feel familiar? You get a ticket to test a new API, but you don't have a map. You're just sending random requests, trying to debug these cryptic errors, and basically just hoping for the best. It really is like trying to navigate a maze in the dark and just bumping into walls over and over again. Look, we've all been there, stuck in what I call the guessing game. You're pinging developers on Slack with questions like, hey, what does this field actually do? Or what error code should I expect here? It's slow, it's inefficient, and frankly, it's frustrating. Now let's compare that to the blueprint method. Here, we have a single source of truth. Everything becomes predictable, efficient, fast, and accurate. It's literally the difference between fumbling around in the dark and just flipping on the lights. So what is this magic blueprint I keep talking about? It's the OpenAPI Specification. This is the document that's going to bring order to that chaos and give you a crystal clear, structured guide to the entire API you're testing. Think about it this way. If your API is this big, complicated machine with all sorts of levers and buttons, well, the OpenAPI documentation is the detailed user manual. You wouldn't try to operate that machine without reading the instructions, right? Same thing here. So let's put a formal name on it. We're talking about the OpenAPI Specification, or OAS for short. You can think of it as the official contract for the API. It's written in this universal format that both humans, like you and me, and our automation tools can understand perfectly. And it describes everything the API is supposed to do without ever needing to look at the source code. Okay, so this is the why you should care moment. Following this blueprint is going to save you a ton of time designing tests. It gets rid of all the guesswork, it means you can write better, more complete tests, and do it faster. And this is the real game changer. Because it's machine readable, you can automate validation right against that source of truth. Trust me, your future self and, yeah, definitely your project manager are going to thank you for this. All right, theory is great, but let's get our hands dirty. How do you actually read this thing? We're going to break down the anatomy of an endpoint, step by step, so you know exactly what you're looking for. This right here is our game plan for decoding any endpoint. It's a simple 4-step process. First, we find the endpoints and the operations you can perform on them. Second, we figure out the request requirements. What data do we actually need to send? Third, we identify authentication. How do we prove we're allowed to be here? And finally, we define the expected responses. What should happen, both good and bad, when we send that request? Let's dig in. Step 1, finding the endpoint. You're going to want to look for a section called Paths in the OpenAPI document. As you can see, it's laid out just like a map. It shows you every available URL path, the HTTP method you can use, like get, post, delete, and a quick little summary of what each one actually does. This is your starting point, your table of contents. Okay, so you've picked an operation, let's say post/orders. Now you got to know what data to send with it. This is where you look for the request body and parameters sections. Think of these as your instruction manual for building the request. They tell you exactly what data the API expects to receive. No more guessing field names. And how does it define that data? It uses something called a schema object. This is a super formal description of what the data should look like. It tells you if a field needs to be a string or a number, an email, if it's required or optional. It's the strict rulebook that your data has to follow. All right, here's a pro tip that is going to save you hours of headaches. Authentication. Instead of guessing how to get access or bugging a dev for the 100th time about what the API key header is called, just look for this security and security schemes sections. They spell it out for you plain as day. Check out this example. The documentation clearly defines a security scheme called API key auth. It tells you the type is API key, it tells you it goes in the header, and it tells you the exact name of that header has to be X API key. See? Zero ambiguity, just crystal clear instructions. So you've built your request, you've sent it off. Now what happens? The responses object is your guide to every single possible outcome. It defines the successful 200 OK, sure, but just as importantly, it details all the failures, like a 404 not found or a 400 bad request. This is absolutely crucial for writing tests for both the happy path and all the error conditions. And here's where things get really efficient. Notice for this 404 response, the docs don't define the whole error structure again. Instead, it uses that little $ref keyword to point to a reusable schema called general error. This is a huge time saver. It means you can write your validation logic for a generic error message just once and then apply it everywhere. That is smart testing. Okay, so you've got the blueprint, you know how to read it. But there are still a few common traps that even seasoned engineers can fall into. Let's make sure you know what to watch out for. These are the 4 big rookie mistakes. Number 1, just ignoring the docs. Don't do it. Number 2, and this one is critical, assuming the docs are always 100% correct. Sometimes they drift from the real implementation. Your job is to find those gaps. Number 3, only testing the happy path and forgetting about all those error responses. And finally, number 4, forgetting to actually use the schema for strict validation. If you can avoid these 4 pitfalls, you're already ahead of the curve. You know, by really mastering how to read and use this documentation, you're not just learning another skill. You're actually gaining a professional superpower. This is the kind of thing that truly sets you apart from the rest of the pack. So you want to operate like the top 1% of QA engineers? Here are their secrets. First, they mandate contract validation on every single API response, no exceptions. Second, they use the OAuth file itself to auto-generate their test assets like entire Postman collections or even mock servers. And third, they become the champions for high-quality documentation on their teams. They make sure this entire process works smoothly for everyone. So let's wrap this up. If you remember nothing else, remember these 3 things. 1, the OpenAPI spec is your contract. It is your single source of truth. 2, it is the foundation for designing fast, accurate, and truly comprehensive tests. And 3, because it's machine readable, it is a massive driver for powerful automation. I'm going to leave you with this thought. If you truly internalize this and start applying these principles in your day-to-day work, you are immediately putting yourself ahead of probably 80% of the engineers out there. This is a genuine career-changing skill. So, I've got a question for you. Now that you have the blueprint, what's the very first endpoint in your current project that you're going to go analyze with this newfound clarity? Go on, go find out.